orbital space stations, retail bag holders incoming. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Space and Defense Update. I'm your host, Mo Islam, and I'm here with Jack Kerr, my co-host and research director at Payload.
Good to be here.
Jack, it's a great day to be here. It's sunny, 75 degrees in New York.
Knicks are in the finals.
Knicks are in the finals. It's officially summer.
Officially summer. We got rockets launching. We have Starship launching. We have New Glenn's launching.
Yes.
Space docks are zooming, which we should definitely talk about at some point in the show.
Yes, we will. I mean, I will say we've never had enough time to talk ball, but I just have one very, very quick question, which is like, how many wins do you think it's going to take the Knicks?
I mean, let's go. Let's say game 6.
Okay.
Game 6 is where they close it out at home at MSG. Work that day, and we declare a full citywide holiday.
Well, the Knicks were here at the Exchange, I think, about a month ago. So hopefully, like, good karma, good.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we get Kyle Kuzma on.
We've waited since 1973. This is our year.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Okay, so it's been a crazy month. SpaceX filed its S1. Yes. You mentioned space stocks are on a total tear. And we're going to talk all about that in a bit, but we have a couple of great guests teed up for today. Today we're going to focus on space stations. We're going to focus on CLD, so the commercial LEO destinations. And we have Jonathan Surin, who's the CEO of Axiom, and then also Marshall Smith, CEO of Starlab. But before we get into the specifics and bring them in, maybe just tell us a little bit about, like, I mean, you've done a ton of work on CLDs. You helped create our space station report. Tell us a little bit about, like, kind of what's going on, sort of the lay of the land.
Yeah, and because we will talk about it the entire day, I will take you from kind of the top and where this program came from and where it's going. So the ISS, International Space Station, is retiring in 2030, maybe could be 2032, but recognizing this, 5 years ago, NASA set up the Commercial LEO Destinations Program. And basically they said, instead of us, paying for a new station and building a $150 billion station like the ISS was, we are going to turn it over to industry, and we believe industry can do it faster, better, and cheaper. So NASA selected Axiom, which we're going to talk to today, Voyager, again, we will talk to a Voyager Starlab CEO today as well, Blue Origin, and then later SpaceX and VAST came on to the program. So they have all been in design phase, development phase, moving things along, but we are coming up on 2029, 2030, and NASA, maybe rightfully so, believes that we are not moving fast enough. So we are at crunch time, NASA's at crunch time, they need to make a decision on where we're gonna go, they need to fully fund this one way or the other. Last year, they decided to move forward with an intermediate stage, or they said they would move forward with an intermediate stage that would fund, that basically down select those 5 stations and try to fund at least 2 stations and maybe loosen some requirements. That has not happened. That kind of was put on pause. Jared Isaacman came into the picture, reassessed things, and then 2 months ago, Jared said, hey, we are really not confident in the commercial LEO destination business model.
Yep.
As a industry-wide endeavor, we need to have more of a hand, and they are now proposing in a way to change the whole program and say that they are going to buy a power module, which will have the life support and energy, the mitochondria of a space station, if you will, and they will procure that from industry. They will own it, attach it to the ISS, and then commercial habitats like Starlab, VAST, or Axiom can then attach to that, eventually breaking off from the ISS and becoming this kind of structure that has a NASA-owned power station and other stations attached to it. So that's where we are. That also could change, but I think the folks here today are going to give some more perspective on it.
Yeah, so I appreciate the mitochondria comment. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. And if you guys don't know, we just acquired a biotech media brand called Decoding Bio. So was that not even?
It was more than everybody knows that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
So we are in biotech now, space defense, energy, and biotech. So very exciting, but we will not be talking about biotech today, maybe another day. Okay, so kind of let me summarize, Jack. So effectively, what did NASA do? So NASA looks at the original CLD plan to fund free-flying stations, certify them, effectively become anchor tenant by the 2030s when the ISS is supposed to retire. And they concluded basically that the LEO business case doesn't close, like as it stands. And now they're kind of basically pulling back and to a much less capital-exposed version that I think in their minds avoids any type of risk of a US gap. Right now, and sort of like the new version of this is like instead of paying companies to build independent stations, NASA basically buys a docking node to attach to the ISS, significantly de-risks the whole like technology part of all this. I guess according to NASA, and effectively at that point, it's much more hardware proven because you have the ISS that's been functioning, and I mean this basically we're about to have Axiom CEO on in a second, but this is their plan or has been their plan. It's almost like it's been written for them. I mean, would you agree?
Yes, I mean I think there's a lot to learn from it, but I think the overarching theme here is NASA looked at this and said. There's some interesting quotes. Maybe I'll read one.
Look, I have this here. So NASA's Amit Kshatriya said, in the current budget we've been allocated, we cannot fund a path of 2 stations. It's a challenge to even fund one. We have a multi-billion-dollar shortfall just to fund 1 station as replacement when the environment we're in right now sets us up for a winner-take-all with an uncertain outcome. Even in non-space commercial markets, there's a higher than 50% failure rate. And then he goes on to say we cannot continue to maintain the illusion that the path we are on is going to close. And then interestingly, in an interview with Payload, our space publication, Jared Isaacman, the administrator of NASA, also said, "I'm not surprised that CLD providers didn't like what we had to say. So prove that we got it wrong." So
we have the CLD providers here today, so let's ask them if they are not happy with the changes, and maybe they are happy with the changes. But yeah, clearly, it is a national imperative that we have a human presence in LEO, and right now it is. I think the mentality is let's find the surest way to close that. And make sure there's no gap in LEO.
Were you, I mean, you've spent a long time working on a report. Were you surprised when NASA came out with these changes?
I was surprised, and in many ways disappointed with them because, for a number of reasons. In general, I think it's very difficult for the supply-based suppliers, investors, to have a program and then 5 or 6 years into it, upend it, switch it around, and it destabilizes an investor base in a way that we shouldn't kind of set a trend doing. Also, CLDs we're largely, and we're always going to be largely funded by investors, and investors were going to be on the hook if they didn't work out. NASA, it's a very small part of NASA's budget, like 2% of NASA's budget, but it's an outsized importance to the reputation of NASA and the importance of NASA of having astronauts be in low Earth orbit, as we've done for the last 20 years. So I was surprised, but I also understand there is a sense of urgency here, and they probably look at the numbers and say, hey, the estimates that CLD providers are putting forth are more marketing material than they are in our estimate real. So it will be interesting to talk to folks today.
Do you think that the SpaceX IPO, which is imminent, is going to open up a floodgate? Let me ask it differently. Do we expect to see any of these providers go public? Like, what do you think about that? I certainly expect, at least.
We've seen a lot. We have seen a lot of companies file to go public in the last 6 months. Folks that you wouldn't have thought to go public are now going public. There's a lot of capital that can be raised on public markets, and something like a station, you can't just continue raising 200 million here, 400 million there. You need a lot of money to close that development. So possible. We will see. I mean, it is a interesting, fun time. Okay, we have our first guest coming on.
Yeah, so Jonathan Certain, CEO of Axiom. Jonathan, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, fellas.
Thanks for coming.
Scoot in.
Get close. Get tight here.
It's a little tight.
Yeah. Okay, we have the payload hat front and center. You got the Axiom logo there.
Yeah, we're gonna make this
brand management.
We're gonna make this a sponsor.
Yeah. Brand management.
Jonathan, tell us how much you love payload.
Yeah.
I'm a Payload Plus subscriber.
There you go. There we go.
Payload Pro.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. That's a great plug for signing up here.
Well, Jack runs our research product, so he's very much appreciative of your support.
I read them and I compare them to analysts across banks.
Yeah.
And what do you think?
You're mostly spot on.
Okay.
Oh,
good.
wow, mostly.
Good.
Okay, well, we'll get into that. John, thanks for being us. So you flew in from Houston?
I did.
Okay.
Just recently.
Well, we appreciate you coming in. I mean, maybe just to kick things off, like, give us the quick, so you just became CEO last summer, or last October, I think I want to say. Yeah, last October. So you're relatively new to the seat, approaching a year this fall. Maybe tell us a little bit about the company and how are things going, and just at a high level, like why you decided to become CEO.
Well, decided is unique, but
You're forced.
I wasn't forced either. Cam gave me a great opportunity to join Axiom, and then ultimately the board invited me to be CEO. Super grateful for those opportunities because Axiom's in an amazing place, right? Just last year we completed private astronaut mission 4, AX-4, and flew 4 astronauts. And our suit is on the way to a qualification deliverable later this year. So great to have the spacesuit nearing milestone completion, finishing CDR on the suit. And we've got space vehicles in development now.
Yep.
I think that one of the more exciting aspects of Axiom for me right now is we just went through a large capital raise. We've got a fair amount of equity. We can judiciously use that to make progress on our various programs. And now it seems like we're coming pretty close to a solicitation for commercial LEO destinations. So it'll up the ante, but it'll make the game more fun.
So when NASA's decision around CLD came out, were you surprised by that? I mean, I think what's interesting was like the previous iteration of the CLD program and how it was written was almost created for the benefit of a free-flying station model. And this model is much more aligned with the Axiom sort of roadmap. So, I mean, were you surprised, and how do you feel about some of the changes so far?
Well, NASA hadn't come to us and said, hey, we're thinking about, changing our approach to this new solicitation. But we've been working with NASA for the better part of 6 years on our architecture, and we were getting a lot of feedback from them about the pros and cons of various different decisions that we were making, and a lot of the benefits for us taking the approach that we were taking for the way that we would berth to the ISS instead of try to do a direct attachment like Crew Dragon, Cargo Dragon, the Cygnus vehicle, HTVX, used the berthing mechanism where the Canada arm grab. So we've been working a lot with them on architecture decisions and all sorts of policy content. So we were really familiar with what they were thinking around our attaching to the space station, and then what they were thinking relative to our detachment and rendezvous. So we kind of got a picture of both. So I didn't know that they were going to do that, but once they did it, I'm like, I'm not surprised.
And you guys, there was also maybe a year and a half ago, NASA and Axiom came together and changed the order of the deployment from a habitation module first to a power module first, which is a little bit of what Mo is getting to. It kind of aligns with what you guys are doing. Maybe just kind of walk us through where that is in terms of timeline. Where's the structure at? I know it's being built in Italy. When does it get shipped to Houston? When do you expect that to be able to fly to the ISS?
So it is in Italy. Administrator Isaacman actually made this point recently that some of the vehicles that were intended for use for Gateway and some Cygnus vehicles had oxidation on it. Called it corrosion.
Sure.
Fair enough word, oxidation. It was actually observed during the ISS using a similar manufacturing technique. They mitigated it. Now it's come back. We've got to mitigate it. So we got to fix that problem. We're going to fix it the same way they fixed it for the International Space Station. The Columbus module, which has been operational now for 18, 19 years, had that same challenge. So we're working our way through that. That should get resolved at the end of the month of June.
Cool.
And then we'll get a shipment by barge. It'll take a little while to go from Italy to Houston Spaceport, but we'll start doing assembly, integration, and test of that vehicle around Halloween. So that's vehicle number one. That's PPTM.
Yep.
Now, depending on this core module approach, if that's what's in the solicitation, we might actually alter our architecture a little bit to enhance our architecture to meet more of the objectives that were outlined in the RFI. So it could be a little different, but all the structures that we need for whatever our final assemblage is are already manufactured. Some of them still have some welds to do, but we're really to the point now with both vehicles that we can start the inside assembly pieces. We've ordered all the long lead items that we need, like the deployable arrays from Redwire and avionics solutions from a variety of different groups. And now it's time for assembly. Mid-28, that's what we're...
Mid-28.
That's what we're trending toward at the moment.
Okay.
And that has a lot of variables in it. Not for nothing. When we were meant to attach to that zenith location, so in the RAM direction, so the forward port, that's actually where they have to put the deorbit vehicle. So to move from that deorbit vehicle location to a different berthing location afforded us the opportunity for an architecture revision.
Yeah.
And that's why the organization at the time made the decision to go from something like HAB1 to now PPTM.
All right, you guys are getting a little too nerdy, so let me bring it back for a second. Why do you think, Jonathan, just to go back to the NASA decision, why do you think NASA kind of decided to do this? What's driving it, in your opinion?
Well, NASA has the mandate because Congress has made it clear and the White House has made it clear that we're going to have a continuous human presence in low Earth orbit. And to manage that risk, that you have options, and so NASA's trying to manage that risk, and it's got a short fuse to figure it out. And so I think a risk management approach would be this: attached to the space station first, demonstrate human safety certification as a consequence, and then NASA will have the confidence that that vehicle is going to meet all the necessary performance requirements, safety requirements, accessibility requirements to be that free flyer.
Yeah.
So it's a risk mitigation is all it is.
And we're currently in sort of RFI phase, the RFP is about to land I think next month, right? Very soon.
I would not be surprised that we see something out of NASA in the next couple of weeks.
And what do you think that will say, or what do you think that will be, what do you think that will look like?
Well, NASA will choose. Is it the free flyer approach? Is it this core plus commercial module approach, or is it somewhere in the middle?
Okay.
I think it's probably a variant of somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to go all the way back to free flyer. I think they've decided that there's real challenge to just going direct to that,
Right.
For a variety of different reasons. But so anyway, I think we see something kind of in the middle.
Well, so the dynamic has been very interesting as far as the companies in general, right? Because there was a very strong competitive dynamic between all the CLD providers, and then this feels like it's brought everyone together, because it's brought everyone together against NASA, and I know there's been a lot of, I mean, I know your stance on this, but I know the free flyers take a very maybe about stronger, strident perspective on this, but in a way it has brought everyone together. I mean, do you feel that from a competitive dynamic perspective?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Max at Vast and Marshall, who's standing up right outside from Voyager, we represent shareholders that have invested a lot of money because NASA said they wanted a solution that looks like this, and so we went out and started raising capital to deliver that. And so that churn that occurs as the variability is entered into the system causes a lot of people concern. And so, Max, Marshall, Dylan, Cam, we all get together and talk about what do we feel like is best for our nation? Because Dylan, Cam, I mean, those are strong patriots that intended to start these companies to serve the U.S. government. And so, what's best? Is this best or something else best? And if whatever we think is best, then let's go advocate for that together. So there is a lot of that collaborative content going on because we really want what's best for the U.S.
Right.
On the cost side of it, I think this is a chief concern from NASA, or something they're really focusing on, and for investors as well. What is the expected cost to build a Axiom station, that being not just the power module, but also the maybe 2 or 3 habitat modules as well?
It's all in, we're going to be north of $2 billion. But,
which, by the way, is much less expensive than the ISS.
Right, but we benefit from all the non-recurring engineering, which is tens of billions of dollars that went into the validation processes to manufacture these systems. And so by using the people that went through that whole process, we don't have to incur those costs. And a lot of that was the space shuttle. I mean, there's $1 billion a launch, every shuttle launch, and that's what assembled the space station. So there's a lot of, SpaceX can launch something for 1/15 the cost of the shuttle with the same amount of power. A little bit smaller cargo. So it's expensive, but it's not as egregious as as we've seen historically, as you're alluding to.
So on that point, the IS. I know there's a few different numbers out there that people quote, but the ISS was about $100 billion to build, manufacture. I think some people even say $150 billion if you include the cost of the shuttle and inflation. 100 to 150 billion is like a huge number. Now, $2 billion is a massively different number, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned NRE, but what's driving such a huge difference in cost? Or is it truly primarily because so much of this has already been figured out?
Well, so a lot of the technology has been figured out, and ultimately it gets to this. When we were trying to develop the International Space Station the first time, we had to come up with the process to design it. Then we had to come up with the processes to down-select the technologies that were going to be in all the different components. We had to validate that, develop test paradigms for that. Then we had to go off and manufacture it. And then we had to develop test capabilities to show that what we manufactured met the requirements. Then we had to test those requirements, which means we had to build facilities to actually do those tests of large objects that we had never manufactured before. That's tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars to do what I just said.
Yeah. Right.
Now it's been done. So I can go to NASA and use the facilities at Johnson Space Center to test the equipment for my space station or my spacesuit. Right? Those facilities exist. I don't have to go spend that money. The test plans and procedures, the processes for assembly, all of that content is now done. And so you can, as long as you follow the process, don't try and invent something brand new, you can take advantage of all of that expense that's already been incurred, and you just have to go build something that follows those processes. But you have the benefit of a lot of additional technologies that also reduce expense.
Yeah.
So you have supply chain, but you also have new technologies for design that they didn't have when they were building the space station, new technologies for test that they didn't have, and all of those things, when you add them all up, there's a substantial amount of savings because of the scale we're now capable of.
Yeah.
And what are you expecting for the annual operations cost? You put the station in space, it's there. What kind of operational costs and maintenance do you expect every year?
The most significant cost and the most variable cost that we have is launch. So the crew and cargo launches, that drives the bulk of the expense. The ground station expenses, that's millions of dollars, if not less.
Yeah.
And we know this because Axiom Space is actually doing this today. When we operate these private astronaut missions, just like we would be operating them if they were Axiom Station, with the caveat that we're not doing critical mission operations because we're not flying the space station. But our space vehicle, once up and operational, it's like 10 people to operate it.
Okay.
Plus, maybe a similar complement to be scheduling time for astronauts and doing all the logistics management and whatever else. So 20, 30 people are operating the space station, not a few thousand that are operating the International Space Station globally. So a lot of cost, the primary cost for us in the short term is going to be crew and cargo launch.
Can we let's talk about the demand side, because I think this was one of the big items that came out of NASA, which was like we see ourselves as the big customer. I think Isaacman has even said that like, hey, I was a private astronaut, so I know what that market looks like, and it's not that big. Like, do you agree with that? Like, how do you think about sort of the actual market? I mean, we can agree that the NASA market's pretty big. I think it's. I looked at these numbers a while ago, so I don't know how accurate this is going to be. So correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan. But from what I remember, the kind of total kind of NASA kind of total ISS spend was something around the $3 to $4 billion a year, of which half of it went to like maintenance capex, and the other half went to like actual productive spend. So one way to think about it is like that number, $1.5 to $2 billion is the yearly potential revenue capture. Now, obviously, NASA wants to lower that. No, NASA doesn't want to necessarily keep it the same. But let's just say that number is $1 billion. Like, I mean, is that how you guys think about it from the NASA side? And then how do you think about it from the non-NASA commercial
That's
side?
how we're thinking about it.
Okay.
I mean, that NASA is, a fair fraction of the market. So I don't disagree with Administrator Isaacman. There's not a large private astronaut market out there, but there's a global sovereign nation astronaut market. There's no lack of demand for nations wanting to fly their astronauts for their own aspirations to use microgravity as a resource. So that's the demand signal. And listen, we've flown 12 paying astronauts to date. We didn't have a problem filling out the crew on any of those missions. We flew a full crew, and I don't see that being a problem moving forward. So saying that there's a private market out there, I think is accurate to question, but there's an international market to fly astronauts. So,
Yeah. Should we talk spacesuits?
We should. Okay, so we had a recent NASA watchdog OIG report that said that Artemis and the ISS spacesuits could slip past 2030. You guys are building NASA's spacesuits for the moon and for the ISS. What is your response to that?
well, the report was 2 years old. I mean, the data that they used was from 2024. And in 2024, we were doing development work at the time. And so if those development efforts were to have been extended, like the report alluded to, we would have had problems meeting our schedule. And in fact, in 2024, there were issues with the schedule. The schedule did change in 2024. But Axiom invested the money to get those development efforts done and behind us. And we're on track to deliver that first qualification suit in November, December this year. And we're on track to deliver the first flight suit for an in-space demonstration, whether it's Artemis 3 or to the International Space Station next year. And importantly, we're manufacturing 5 suits right now. That qualification suit, that ISS or Artemis 3 suit, the first 2 suits for Artemis 4. So that we're in production now. We're completing CDR. There's a couple of specific components that we need to work through the technology maturation validation efforts. But we're now making suits. So the OIG report was accurate in 2024 to some degree, and it's inaccurate now because 2 years of effort have gone into making sure we're on track. And by the way, NASA is deeply involved in our spacesuit program. I mean, we've got a few hundred NASA engineers and test personnel in our facilities on an ongoing basis. We're a few miles from Johnson. Our suits in the pool every week being tested. So it's a strong collaboration with NASA, and Administrator Isaacman has made it crystal clear to me that he is going to stay on top of that program and make sure we're not late, and I believe him.
Do you see any probability that SpaceX enters the spacesuit game?
I think that's a high degree of probability that they would. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they want to fly hundreds of people on their Starship. They're their paradigm has always been do it yourself. So I wouldn't be surprised.
What is the so you guys just raised 350 million? Is that yeah? So a few hundred million. Do you have plans to raise another round soon? What is the financing?
Well, space stations are expensive, so yeah, we will need to continue to raise capital. Depending on what this commercial LEO destination solicitation looks like, that'll kind of frame out for us what our go-get is on the total capital to go. But wouldn't be surprised if you hear us make some announcements about additional raises here in the near future.
And is most of that fundraise going to station, or is it like 50-50 with the spacesuits? Is it 80-20 station spacesuits? How do you think of it?
So we've invested a lot in the spacesuit already. So we still have some engineering work to do. So we do spend a little bit of money on the spacesuit. A couple of million kind of is the monthly-ish add that we're adding to R&D on the suit. The bulk of the equity is going to the space station.
Jonathan, just give us, as we wrap here, just give me like a quick pulse check. What did you think about the SpaceX S1? Were you underwhelmed, overwhelmed, or just
I wouldn't say I was overwhelmed. I was entertained. I was totally entertained. And you know, they're aiming big. I aspire to do the same. So good on them. I thought it was bold. I thought there's a lot of stuff in there that, you know, is aspirational. But I mean, Elon has definitely demonstrated that he can meet pretty lofty aspirations. So I thought it was awesome. I thought it was entertaining.
There you go.
I'm looking forward to June 12th or thereabouts.
It'll be fun.
It'll be fun. Jonathan, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you. Speaking of, we have our next show will be on the SpaceX IPO.
Yes, that is true.
June 9th. Okay, we have our next guest.
Hey, how you doing?
Good to
Marshall,
see you.
thanks for being with us.
Good to see you.
Great to see you. Great to see you. Hopefully the travel in wasn't too bad.
That was great.
Have you been here to the exchange here?
I have. I've been here once when Voyager did their IPO last year, almost a year ago today.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Marshall, I really appreciate you guys, you being with us and representing Starlab and the Voyager organization. Maybe just to kick things off, you can give us a little like overview of Starlab and how it fits into the Voyager portfolio.
Yeah. So Voyager is actually our take on a private space station. First of all, we've learned a lot over the years. Basically, space stations have been up in orbit for 50 plus years, various incarnations of them. And so we know quite a lot about that. And one of the things we've learned quite a bit about is things not to do in space. And building in space is very difficult. Having a modular approach, those types of things, that cost a lot of time, money, and effort. So we went with being able to maximize the volume of these large launch vehicles that are out there like New Glenn and Starship. And how do we maximize that, and how do we make it work for the commercial space industry? And of course, Voyager has been in space for the last 15 years. We actually started the commercial space revolution, if you will, on ISS. 15 years or so ago, we started the first work in that area. And then, of course, we have Bishop Airlock, which is actually on there and operating today, first commercial piece of real estate on the ISS. So we understand the market very well. We understand what the needs are. So the next obvious step is to go do a platform. Now, our station's large. It's basically 40% of the ISS's pressurized volume. It has 100% of the payload capacity, so that's a very large capability, and not even counting the external capability too. So it's designed to go up, operate almost from day one.
So we just had Jonathan from Axiom on, and their whole architecture is attaching to the ISS. It's always been, you guys are free flying. Maybe just give us a quick sort of gut check on how you took the news when NASA announced what they wanted to do with CLD. Like, what was kind of going through your mind, and why do you think they decided to go in that direction? Yeah,
I think for me, I think the comments that there was no market kind of made us go, wait a minute, we see a huge market. We've been obviously in this world. To me, it's kind of like, to think that we can't populate one or two stations with a market from our entire globe, it just doesn't make sense to me. So that's probably the biggest thing. About attaching the ISS or not, I mean, we can do both. We can make that work as well. We haven't been going down that path, but we're working with NASA to see what kind of options they want to put out there and where they want to go, and then we can adjust accordingly.
And where is Starlab at in terms of development?
Yeah, so we just finished in December our critical design review activity, and we're off starting manufacturing. We've actually started all long lead items. We've already started manufacturing on our materials. We're looking at the structures to be done sometime at the end of this year, which will be next we move to integration and test. So, just like Axiom and some others, we've been on this road for 5 years. We've done quite a bit of design work, all the necessary activities, so now it's go do.
So, when NASA and Isaacman made these comments about the market, I think a lot of folks, the CLD providers were definitely scratching their heads saying, like, what are you talking about? But Isaacman's a pretty smart guy, right?
Sure.
He's built a very big fintech company
brilliant.
and is now NASA administrator. Like, what do you think is missing? And also, the other thing, which I think is interesting, which Jack and I were talking about a couple days ago, which is the CLD budget as a percentage of NASA's budget is how much? Like
2%?
2%, 3%. So, like, it feels like CLD has been sort of like pushed to the side as like little brother and or sister. Like, what do you think? Is there like a dynamic that's going on in NASA where it's just like, hey, the CLD is just not, hey, if I was Jared Isaacman, I'm thinking I can land on the moon. We can land on the moon during my administration, and that would cement me as like the administrator that brought astronauts back to the moon. I mean, that's you get remembered forever for that. So, do you think it's just more like a prioritization? Like, hey, this is my priority, and this little 2-3% budget line item, like, it's great, but it's not really moving the needle for us.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. Obviously, I appreciate you going there, but I can't speak to that. But what I will say, certainly going to the moon and Artemis is very important to the country, and we're really behind it. At Voyager, for example, we're doing quite a bit in that area. You'll see some moves in the future that'll really show how we're moving into the lunar environment and other things. We've already announced partnerships, for example, like with Max Space for inflatable structures. Mm-hmm. When I was at NASA, I was somewhat leading quite a bit of this work before, inflatables.
What did you do at NASA?
Well, I was director of human exploration for a while, and the Starship contract, for example, was led under me. And
so you're the guy. You know.
Well,
you know exactly what's going to happen.
I'm a guy. So so I've been very involved. I really am about Moon, Mars, and beyond as well. And so I'm very excited about that. And I thought all the things that came out in Ignition were very exciting. Love to see them all happen. When it came to CLD and kind of what I look at from a budget perspective, since you brought it up, our contention is we have a business model the business model is NASA pays for what they actually use and no more. And they don't pay different rates. We're not asking for the U.S. government to pay, twice the amount that maybe a commercial entity would use. Basically the same prices everywhere. And there's more than enough in that budget, we think, for it to be split in two, to be able to fund 2 space stations of some kind. So that's where we were with the budget, and we've made that known through the RFI process.
Let's talk Starship, because it was recently revealed that in Voyager's, one of Voyager's earnings, one of their SEC filings, that Voyager paid $90 million for a Starship launch. Starlab, I think, is purpose-built for a Starship type vehicle. Right now, they don't have the payload door to release your station. What is the timeline, do you think, on that payload door? Obviously, theoretically, if you guys move forward, it is going to be a national imperative for SpaceX to allow that capability, especially with your vehicle. What are the conversations you're having with SpaceX, and when do you expect that door, and what do you expect that door to look like on Starship?
Yeah, we talk all the time with SpaceX. Obviously, they're our launch vehicle, and so our engineers are working with their engineers about how to design the fairing and how we would deploy the vehicle, and how do we support the Starlab in the fairing itself. So that all work is ongoing. One thing I get asked a lot is, well, are you worried about SpaceX being there? Because everybody talks about that. I'm not at all. You remember, SpaceX has got a contract to land on the surface of the moon, by 28. Mm-hmm. We just have to go to orbit. We're already doing that. So the biggest thing we've got to do now is deal with the fairing, which is in work. I have no doubts or qualms at all that we'll be there. And so that's where we are with Starship.
Do you have contingency plans? Like, let's just say Starship is behind schedule in terms of Starlab is ready, but Starship is not. And then how are you thinking about, the other launch vehicles that are out there, like, New Glenn?
Well, New Glenn's certainly an option too. If the worst case scenario happened, we could go back and do that. We fit in both fairings since New Glenn announced that, but we weren't designed that way originally because New Glenn wasn't announced or even out there. But certainly that is an option if it had to be that way. But SpaceX is our primary launch vehicle.
Could you maybe share a little bit about sort of cost structure? So Jonathan here at Axiom said that, we asked him cost and he said north of $2 billion, which to me is less than $3 billion. So let's just say 2 to 3 billion. And maybe I'm putting words in his mouth. Can you share a little bit about like where Starlab kind of fit? I mean, and then you got ISS at 100 billion.
Right.
So where does kind of Starlab fit in that?
So let's
range?
talk about ISS a second. So I keep hearing this word 100 billion. I used to say it when I was at NASA. It's a big number, but built into that, you could probably guesstimate maybe 50 to 60 billion is just pure space shuttle launch cost.
Sure.
That's money that's burned up. Yeah. That's number one. The other part of that is the way you look at the way the ISS is, and people are going, oh, well, there's no way you can do it for 3 billion, for example, because it costs 100 billion for the ISS. Well, first of all, you got launch cost to deal with. So, folks that have modular systems, you might spend $1 billion just in launch cost alone, whereas we've cut it down to 1. You've already quoted the number. So that's a huge advantage for us. Second of all, when you look at this, when the ISS was built, the size was limited to the size of what you could put in the back of a shuttle. And it's about 5 meters or so. And that was a big issue because now you had to put particularly toxic things like coolant and other things like that on the outside. So now you've got EVAs and now you have to maintain it and you have to build on the outside, and you have to maintain on the outside. All of that costs a lot of money. And so that really inflates the cost. So comparing ISS to say what we're doing today isn't really kind of like apples and apples.
Sure.
We're not building the ISS. We're building a single system that we can build on the ground. We can test out on the ground in its entirety, launch it, and it's ready to go roughly within literally weeks. And that is a huge cost savings. So we can get our cost down dramatically. I think that's a big thing to kind of keep in mind. And as far as our cost structure, roughly 2 to 3 billion, north of 2 billion for sure. We're talking, but we're building a full-up free-flying space station all at once. So, if you take all the modules and put them together from various competitors, you're probably going to end up in that same ballpark, if not more, especially when you add on launch cost.
Yep. So there is from NASA's perspective, I know we talked about how there is a global market for this, and there is some conversations about international folks and countries wanting more of a barter system. But let's just say just hypothetically, there is no other customer except for NASA. NASA is a substantial customer. There is $1.5 billion a year theoretically going to a Starlab. Maybe half of that goes to Dragon for transportation. Does the business case close just with NASA revenue?
Well, actually, NASA's only part of that. It's a good chunk, for sure. NASA's only part of that revenue, and we plan for that. But we also look at other sovereign nations, ESA, JAXA, CSA, other sovereign nations being key players too, as well as commercial and universities. And over time, you're going to see that commercial ramp up. You're going to see some of the sovereigns maybe not necessarily go down, but their percentage will go down as to what the revenue is. I think that's going to be big, especially as we move into biopharmas, because ISS has been great. It's super complex. It's fantastic. We've learned quite a bit about how to do stations, toilets, and all these other things that are difficult to deal with in microgravity. But it's not a great platform to say really ramp up commercial markets. It's just not. And so you want to go into commercial environment where you can prioritize certain activities so that you can ramp biopharma and other things like that. And it'll make a huge difference. So we're going to see that change dramatically.
What is the state of the ISS today? Like, how would you?
Well, it's leaking.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't sound great.
Not usually.
But no, in general, and I know this, retirement date of ISS it feels like it keeps getting pushed back. But how dire is the situation?
Well, I'm not ISS. You'd have to ask them. But,
Sure.
but certainly it can't go forever.
Yep.
I mean, it's old. Matter of fact, during ignition, NASA made a big point about talking about how it's old, it's obsolete. It needs to be replaced. Everybody acknowledges that. The question is the timing of when. Can the ISS go, 5 or 10 more years? Maybe, but it might not make it tomorrow. I don't want to say that, but it's entirely possible, depending upon what happens in the systems and what fails and when it fails. Some of that's pretty unpredictable. And so that's kind of what you've got to deal with. And so it's imperative that we move CLDs forward as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, to make sure we have a solution. Because I can tell you that China has just doubled down, actually. They're doubling the size of their station. They are developing products and things that will actually change transform the economy, from semiconductors using AI chips, metals and materials that can be used in hypersonic vehicles. They're actively pursuing that, and the longer we don't have that capability and we're not doing that critical research, the more the United States and the Western world is going to fall behind.
So maybe on that note, I would love to ask about the market, meaning you brought up two cool examples. Remember back in the day, people used to talk about microgravity and Z-bland and how big of that market was, and then that sort of felt like a little bit of a false start. Like, are there kind of near-term markets that you can point to and say, hey, these are big, scalable markets where we can generate real revenue, outside of the astronaut game?
Yeah, I think biopharma is obviously one. You're going to hear that a lot. I mean, everybody talks about it because everybody says, oh, well, they've been doing it on the ISS a long time. Yeah, but we just can't scale it. Once we go to commercial, we can start scaling that. We can start scaling, miracle drugs. I mean, do we want to buy our miracle drugs from China, or do we want to buy them from a U.S. company? Those are the kinds of things that you can only make in microgravity. When I look at the business ecosphere, microgravity is just a place because it has a condition that we need to make a product better. The business actually happens on the ground in the business ecosystem. So between biopharma, semiconductors, for example, you can take semiconductor material. There's a material that you would use in advanced AI chips. Then on the ground, you only get a 5% yield as a seed kernel structure. But in space, you get a 95% yield. Now each kilogram's worth $1 million or more instead of 5% of that. So it is literally going to transform once we start manufacturing these types of things in space. It will transform the economy on the ground.
I want to talk about VAST. So VAST has built a station, a smaller station than what it eventually proposes to do. And they built it, you can see it, it's going through testing. They have a launch date next year, theoretically. And they could become the first standalone station in orbit next year. What does that look like? Does that validate or complicate Starlab's story if that happens? What does that look like vis-a-vis NASA and these changes, these proposed changes, if VAST just has a standalone station next year?
Yeah, I guess you have to define what a space station is. To me, a space station is something that can support life on its own. That's been the definition, going back 55 years. It could be a crew-tended station, but it has to be able to support life on its own. So it has to have its own life support system, has its own power, those types of things to do that. I think Haven 1 probably doesn't do that initially. Now Haven 2, certainly, that would be something that would be good. So what you'll see is a crew-tended platform where people go up for a couple weeks. It's interesting, but the kinds of things that we're talking about are month-long missions. I think when you look at PAM missions and other type missions, they're good. Matter of fact, Voyager just won PAM 7, which is exactly what we want to do as we move toward operations on ISS. I mean, it's gone on to ISS, but move on operations to Starlab. That's very important and a good thing to go do the exerciser system. But most of our customers don't want 2-week missions. They want, 3-4 month missions, sometimes 6 months. We actually have a customer that wants a year-long mission. And those are where you get the bang for the buck. And so it's an interesting thing. And while I'm all for, everybody making progress, that's great. And I'll be very happy about that. I think we need to get to a true station capability where we have crews up there doing manufacturing, doing the work full time.
Yeah. And on the actual crew quarters side, I know Hilton, I believe, is designing your crew quarters. Kind of interesting partnership there. Like, how do you think about the leisure and tourism side of all this?
Yeah, so Hilton's a great partner. Matter of fact, Hilton has been involved in the hospitality industry, as we all know, for quite a while, and they know how to design small habitats to make them livable, to make sure that they are clean, germ-free, those types of things, and that's very important, and to make it comfortable. So, and also Hilton's been very interested in the space. If you go back to articles, there's ads from the 60s where they show a Conrad Hilton space station orbiting like the typical saucer kind that went around. So they've joined us as a partner to help us do the design work, to work on the things that will make life more comfortable. Now, as far as tourism goes, that's not part of our base model. It is certainly a small chunk. You know, we expect the occasional tourist, but that's not what we're shooting for. We think the real market is in sovereign astronauts, commercial astronauts, those types of things, and we'll sprinkle in tourists as they're interested.
Yeah, and the reason for that is a seat costs $50 million on SpaceX Dragon capsule. But let's fast forward a decade or two. What needs to happen to make the cost of going to space and the cost to lodge at a Starlab station less than, let's say, $1 million a person? So from 50 million to $1 million, or less than $1 million, or a couple $100,000. What needs to happen? What do you see that eventually happening, or is that too far out there?
No, I don't think it's too far out. I think that it really comes down to a big driver in this is launch cost. Launch cost is going to come down as we launch more. So when SpaceX and other players out there, New Glenn and others, launch more and more, you're going to see that come down dramatically. Just like we saw in the cargo market. You know, when look at payload price during the shuttle days, it was 50,000 a kilogram. You know, so it's huge dollar cost. But now it's like $2,000 a kilogram.
Right.
Tremendous difference. And same thing as commercial space costs. You know, people go, how in the world can you take $100 million, which we've already discussed is not real, and get it down to $3 billion, $100 billion, get it down to $3 billion? Well, you got to go through and do the math, but you know, that's the kind of thing that's happening here. And we're on the precipice of that revolution, if you will. I've looked at, you know, any industry out there, railroads, airplanes. They start with the government owned, government operated, and then it's government owned, commercial is engaged, leasing or doing work on it. And then we're at that inflection point where it's commercial owned, government is a major player to keep it going. And then of course we move to the whole full commercial on, like telecommunication satellites are now, where that takes off.
So I know a lot of these details haven't been revealed, but what is kind of future state of Starlab look like? What does the next kind of version 2, version 3 of the station look like? Let's kind of fast forward, you know, a decade.
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like?
Our plan is we can connect with more modules, but you know, our goal is we have lots of different customers, have lots of different needs. And so it's actually more cost effective we look at to say tailor Starlab 1, which is very large, to science and research, which is what we've done. Starlab 2 might be devoted to manufacturing semiconductors, or it might be devoted to manufacturing human hearts in space, which is entirely something that's being discussed right now. These types of things, it's kind of hard to tell. For example, if you look at your iPhone in 2007, nobody would have imagined what we're doing with it today. Just wouldn't have thought that. Very, very few people.
Yeah.
That's exactly where we are today. I think we're at the cusp of, we're building this toolkit that can be used, and how it's used in 10 or 15 years, I don't know, but I can promise you it's going to be great.
Yeah. Jonathan, did you look at the SpaceX S1?
Did I look? Oh yeah, of course.
Or sorry, Marshall, excuse me, I called you.
That's all right. I've been called worse.
I apologize.
Jonathan and I are friends.
No, you guys are friends, so it's all good. We're all one family. So Marshall, did you look at the? You looked at the S1. I actually asked him the same question, which is probably why my mind was in that zone. What were your kind of thoughts on some of the numbers? Because you know, our general take from what we've, you know, our pulse check on the market was, you know, there was a lot of hype and a lot of excitement, and then the numbers came out, and everyone was like, oh, I see. Like there, you know, it wasn't what we expected as far as this, like, you know, these big kind of revenue numbers. And
right.
Just kind of curious to get your
Well,
your
I mean,
thoughts.
I kind of expected somewhat similar because I'm inside the market. I've seen some of this stuff. I kind of understand, you know, a little bit about who their customer base is and what they're doing, and understand the launch costs and things like that. So I wasn't super shocked. I mean, there's a lot of hype because people get excited about it.
Yeah.
I get it. I want them to do well, because when they do well, the rest of the space industry does well. But yeah, I wasn't 100% surprised.
Got it. Okay. Amazing. Well, Marshall, thanks so much for being with us. It was
Thank
great.
you.
It's fun.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to see all the progress and
Wonderful.
And you know, how this all kind of develops and evolves. So thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thanks. See you.
So, a lot of different views.
A lot of different views.
How do you,
What's interesting is, so Starlab is a big, I'm going to move over a little bit too, we're a little close. Starlab is a big station, much bigger than the Axiom models. That's their whole idea, is that Starlab fits in a starship. It's going to be interesting because Marshall said that if need be, it can append to this power module that NASA might try to procure. That is going to be a funny looking thing because it'll have ISS, which is big, and then Starlab appended through this power module that's also big. So I'm looking forward to seeing a rendering of that, or maybe the real thing.
Yeah. So I mean, we will see. We will see. Now you gave it away during our interviews that our next show is going to be about SpaceX.
Yes.
All things SpaceX. It'll be days before the IPO, so
Yes.
it'll be very exciting. I don't want to give away too much, but we need to address it because it did come out. I mean, you and I have been maybe not arguing, but we've been going back and forth about kind of our views around the valuation and the market. And you just put out this piece for us on key takeaways and I guess you called it nuggets from the SpaceX S1.
Tidbits.
Yeah, tidbits.
Tidbits.
And yeah, so maybe I'd love to go through a few of those just to kind of get into it, warm us up for our next show, maybe dig in just a little bit because I mean it's probably the most looked at S1 of all time.
For sure.
And I do think, I do kind of stand by my comments earlier, which is I do think like for most of the market, it was a little bit of a disappointment in terms of like what the numbers look like and the expectation versus the valuation. And you have a lot of varying, views on the company. I mean, what is your high level kind of take on the S1? I mean, did it meet your expectations?
So yeah, I mean the financial. If you just look at the financials, it doesn't. If we go to fundamentals, it doesn't. It's not going to add up. But you really have to dig in and understand the SpaceX story, and we cover this all the time, and know how advanced their technology is and how important their technology being Starship, their technology being Falcon 9, their satellites, and how inexpensively they are made. And to understand that, and to understand that they are building at the infrastructure level, which is why the cash flow is struggling, and maybe why they are just now getting the flywheel effect with the Starlink revenue. That you have to kind of look at that and say and believe that hey, Starlink is playing in one of the biggest, if not maybe the second biggest, next to AI, which they are also playing in markets in the world, which is connectivity. And they have a lot of room to run here. They built at the infrastructure layer, and that Starlink revenue will continue growing. So let's talk about some of these numbers because that's at a high level. We have 4 or 5 kind of interesting tidbits that came out of it. Revenue. This is 2025 revenue. Starlink was by far their biggest contributor. Revenue was 18.7 billion.
Total revenue was 18.7
Total revenue was 18.7 billion. On a pretty substantial cash burn.
Yep.
Breaking that down, Starlink was 11.4 billion. Launching NASA astronauts or customer payloads, 4.1 billion, and AI was 3.2 billion. So Starlink is definitely leading this business right now. One of the, I would say, concerning parts of the S1 was not the 2025 revenues, the Q1 revenue, where Q1 revenue was up only 15% year over year, which was a pretty significant slowdown, and particularly in that I'd say AI revenue compared to Anthropic and OpenAI, it's a lot less.
Well, so around 19 billion in revenue for 25. The Anthropic data center deal alone is worth something like 15 billion a year, right? So a little over $1 billion a year. What is your? I mean, that's more than, I mean, 50%. Substantially more than 50% of their revenue last year. I'm sure it's going to be a lot closer to maybe 50%, maybe even less this year. But I mean, that's by far. I mean, that's from a financial perspective for sure the biggest headline for SpaceX. Like, I mean, what do you think about that?
Yes. So that deal is on the AI side. SpaceX and XAI, which merged last year, are building these very impressive and very large data centers In AI is a function of compute capacity. SpaceX and Elon does a tremendous job with xAI of building data centers very fast. Anthropic needs the compute capacity, so they are now renting capacity from, which would be SpaceX xAI, at the tune of $15 billion a year. So that goes back to what I was talking about. On its face, if you look at that 18.7 billion of revenue and that slow growth, it doesn't look phenomenal, but you start to dig in a little more and you see that, hey, next year or in the next 12 months, they're going to essentially double that just with this Anthropic data center lease deal, and the story starts to improve. And that, if you want to look at it as a, price to EV or market cap, that becomes a little bit more reasonable when you start to layer on, particularly this Anthropic deal.
Yeah, and you're very bullish about the Cursor acquisition.
Yes, I am very bullish about it. I think it is and in a way, do you have any thoughts on the Cursor acquisitions?
I mean, I haven't looked at it as closely as you do. I mean, I think it makes sense. I know SpaceX, or xAI, I should say, is behind on that workflow. So it kind of makes sense to me why they decided to join that partnership or launch that partnership with Cursor, with the option to buy them. But now it looks like they are definitely going to acquire them.
Yeah, and xAI, as you said, they are behind pretty substantially Anthropic and Claude, and OpenAI with ChatGPT. Those companies have takeoff revenue, and you can look in the S1. xAI's revenue is mediocre at best. I mean, particularly compared to these other folks. So compared to all the spend, that is not great. So what they did is they partnered with Cursor. They have a deal an option to buy Cursor, which I think is going to happen for $60 billion. Cursor is a coding AI agent, which ends up being a lot of this market's revenue is just coding. And Cursor has the third most ARR amongst all AI businesses, pretty significantly behind OpenAI and Anthropic. But I think they're at like $3 billion of ARR, and that is growing pretty fast. So this is going to be a way for them to participate in some of the growth at the harness level with Cursor. And we see how fortunes can change very quickly in AI. Saw that with Anthropic. And there is an angle, and this is kind of why there's a lot of excitement around their AI play. There is an angle in which they come from behind, maybe with this Cursor acquisition, and really start to accelerate that AI revenue, which right now is looking mediocre at best.
Yeah, and as far as kind of the AI plan in general, the company is planning to launch satellites, the AI satellites, in 2028, I think is the time frame. Does that feel? I mean, given how much that they've been able to scale Starlink in their Bastrop facility in Texas, do you feel like? I mean, that feels a little late to me as far as like SpaceX capabilities, and also, I mean, they put in FCC filing to do 1 million of these satellites. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that was another thing that was revealed in the prospectus. They're going to the AI sats are going to be deployed in 2028. To me, that feels late for a prototype and early-ish for full-scale deployment. Obviously, they have Starlink and they know how to manufacture at scale and deploy satellites, but no matter how you slice it, it is going to take a number of years, probably 3+ years, to stand up the supply chain for it's a spacecraft, it's a satellite, but the architecture looks very different. And that is going to be a question with investor patience. We've been doing this a long time. We know that we understand that rockets take a long time to develop. Satellite constellations take a long time to develop, but in a way that's a good thing because you can create these moats and it's hard for another competitor to keep up. The public markets have a different understanding of patience and timelines. Maybe they're a little conditioned with Tesla to kind of take the Elon, give him an Elon premium, but kind of understand that timelines aren't exact. But it's even with Starship, it's been flying technically with prototypes for 7 years, and it's not yet operational. Will be operational, but it just takes time.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very clear looking at the business, and Scott Galloway, who's a tech pundit out there who has very strong views about companies and, hasn't been right that much about it.
Yeah.
So I'll caveat that.
Yeah.
But he has come out pretty strongly against the SpaceX valuation. I think he said that he thinks that the fair value is 600 billion, 650 billion, something like that. And basically, but what he did say is he's a huge, the Starlink is a great business. He did admit that it's a great business, and they've been doing very well, profitable, cash flowing, and part of that story is the direct-to-cell story, Starlink Mobile. Right now, it's I think 600 million, 630 million of the total Starlink pie, so small. But do you think that that's going to be a bigger market than the current Starlink consumer kind of broadband business, enterprise broadband?
Ooh, that's a good question. SpaceX believes it's going to be a massive market.
Yeah.
And they bought $20 billion of EchoStar spectrum to go down this path. And right now it's still phrased as, I guess, backup, dead zone, supplement, connectivity, just direct to cell and partner with MNOs. But it is looking more and more that they're at least going to explore having a full stack connectivity option and maybe be more of a competitor to an MNO, which is a mobile network operator, like a T-Mobile or AT&T or Verizon, than just a partner. We'll see where that goes. I mean, they need to deploy new, bigger satellites, maybe bring them a little lower to be able to bring that connectivity. But I do think that this is a big future for SpaceX, probably more than a lot of outside analysts see just kind of conceptualizing it.
Yeah. I want to talk about the lockup for a second. So the insider lockup, so it's interesting to me. So I'll just kind of go through what it is and we can talk about it. So basically, the rule is, they'll go public, 20% will be unlocked after Q2 2026 results. Another 10% if the stock trades 30% above the IPO price for 5 of the 10 trading days before Q2 earnings. And then 7% after each of the 70, 90, 105, 120, and then 135 day marks. And then finally 28% after Q3 26 results. But importantly, Elon is not allowed to sell anything in that early release. So, I mean, to me, we've been hearing that. Do we expect? Actually, I'll ask the question: do we expect a lot of SpaceX employees to be selling stock, like a considerable amount of stock? Obviously, the employees will sell.
Yeah.
But have you heard anything from current SpaceX employees as to what their plans are with their stock?
Yeah, I think investors, institutional investors, senior level executives may not, or probably, I don't see them selling en masse, particularly senior executives. I don't see Elon or Gwen really selling this business at all. If you are an employee and you just came into $10 million, the prudent thing to do is to diversify that a little bit. You might still believe in the SpaceX story, but it's okay to take those holdings down 50% and diversify a little bit. I haven't talked to one employee that said they're going to just wholesale sell everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a unique. There's some questions about the float. There's some questions about how do you manage and how investment banks manage and stabilize the price, and you can kind of see it with this unique lockup period.
So I want to just talk. Maybe we can move on from SpaceX after this, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I'll say maybe favorite part about the SpaceX S1 is how, my read on a particular section on launch is that it is going to be quite bullish for other launch companies outside SpaceX. And we've talked about this on the show, we've talked about it ad nauseum. But per their S1, the AI TAM is 71 times larger than space. Okay, and it represents 93% of SpaceX's total addressable market, right? The AI TAM. And then there's this line in the S1 where it says we allocate a significant amount of launch capacity to our connectivity segment and expect to allocate a significant amount to our AI segment in the future. Okay, so what that's saying is we're going to put out a lot of launch capacity for Starlink. We knew that, and then we're going to put out a lot of launch capacity, a significant amount of launch capacity to our AI segment. Now, if AI and connectivity are consuming the majority of SpaceX's launch capacity, why would they dedicate any meaningful capacity to commercial launch customers? Now, we just talked to Marshall about how Voyager has, they paid $90 million for Starship launch. But I mean, what do you think? I mean, my personal opinion is I think that yes, Starship will be available to commercial to a degree, but I think that it's largely overestimated what that degree is because there's just so many more competing priorities. You got Starlink, you got the AI satellites, you got the moon, all coming up very quickly and at the same time.
Yeah, and it's just even in Falcon 9, it's that launching customer revenue is a flat business, revenue-wise and cadence-wise. So the read of the S1 is it's definitely, I would say de-emphasizing customer launches, but probably the better way of putting it is it doesn't really touch on it that much.
Sure.
They talk about the internal capacity. I will say there is one note that says, in the S1 that says, Starship will benefit customers who want to launch their payloads on Starship. Side note, but it does kind of open up the fact that I do think that they will eventually open up Starship to customer payloads. What I think we should talk about is the other rocket companies.
Sure.
Because there are two other businesses that are publicly traded that have one in particular named Rocket Lab, which has gone bonanza this year. They are, I don't know what they're up today or what their market cap is today, but they are around $87 billion of market cap. They recently surpassed Northrop, huge prime, that is doing something like $45 billion of annual revenue, or Rocket Lab is doing something like 650 million, not with a B, million with an M, of revenue, and now Rocket Lab is valued more than Northrop. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, this one's a hard one, right? Like, Rocket Lab is worth more than Northrop Grumman, which, like, effectively is the foundation for a nuclear triad, and is worth more than Northrop generating 2% of their revenue. And if you look at some of the Wall Street estimates that are out there on Rocket Lab's revenue out to like 2030, I mean, they're doing, you mentioned like 600-ish million they did in fiscal year 25. Their 26 estimate, I think, is around 900 million, like close to $1 billion. But if you look at most of those like estimates out to 2030, those numbers are around $2.5 billion. And these are even from like the most bullish analysts. So if you're saying like, hey, in 2030, this company will do $2.5 billion of revenue, by then Northrop's probably doing, I don't know, 45, 50 billion, maybe more. Like that feels like a hard valuation pill to swallow and accept that okay, yes, I mean, there's no question I mean, you were mentioning this the other day that like the gross margin profile of Rocket Lab is substantially better than Northrop, which is true. But I mean, when you just take a look at the gap in valuation, I mean, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, it's getting rich for sure. And I think there's a let's comp it to SpaceX narrative going around, which I don't think is the most accurate or fair, because a lot of SpaceX's growth and value is on, well, they've proven it, first of all. Second of all, it's on the AI story. There's a lot of things to like about Rocket Lab. They are going to continue winning these Pentagon contracts. They'll do it. They'll complete them more efficiently, and they have access eventually, potentially, to the commercial markets when they get Neutron, which is their new next-gen rocket flying, and then they can sell a constellation through that. That being said, we are in nosebleed territory for sure, and that surpassing Northrop is a significant milestone that raises questions.
And by the way, not to just pick on Rocket Lab, right? I mean, I was looking at this earlier this week. So Deutsche tracks 50 public space companies globally, and in total, they've said that these companies are worth 400 billion total market cap, or up 3.5 times in the last year, right? In the last year, 3.5 times. And in terms of year-to-date performance, the average change in in the market cap of those space companies are 138%, median being 75%, versus Nasdaq, which is up 15%, right? So, and if you kind of break that down, launch is up 80%, connectivity is up 64%, Earth observations up 160%. This is year-to-date numbers, by the way, and then space components is up 206%. So interesting, but so the entire ecosystem is doing very, very well. It's far outpacing, outperforming like any other kind of index or any other technology, maybe outside of AI. So I think it's not just Rocket Lab. But what's interesting is within sort of that ecosystem, you're starting to see like the bifurcations in like the companies that maybe I won't go as far as to say the haves and the have-nots, but definitely there are companies that like certain investors have anointed as like the business, like Rocket Lab, and others that have done well but don't quite have those valuation multiples. And the one that sticks out just because it's such a near peer comp is Firefly. So if you look at those numbers, so you mentioned earlier Rocket Lab trades around 85 billion market cap right now. The market's down a little bit today on 600 million of 25 revenue and about close to $1 billion of 26 consensus revenue. So that's about 120, 130 times trailing and 90 times forward sales multiple. Firefly trades around a $9 billion market cap on 160 million of 25 revenue, guiding to 26 to about 450 million. So that's 56 times trailing, 20 times forward. Again, Rocket Lab's 130-ish and 90 times forward. So right, on the surface, you look at that and you say, okay, well, Firefly is so much cheaper. Like, what's going on? And not to take anything away from Rocket Lab, clearly their execution track record has been far superior, lengthier, more robust. Also, their backlog, Rocket Lab's Q1 backlog is north of 2 billion, doubled last year. Firefly's is about half that at around $1 billion. So actually, if you look at it on a backlog to revenue basis, it actually looks a little bit closer, like it's closer to 4 for Rocket Lab and closer to 3 for Firefly. And you mentioned Neutron, much farther along than Eclipse, which is Firefly's medium launch vehicle. So I just think that's interesting because like the question becomes, and I guess maybe this is the question I'll throw at you, is that gap in valuation is almost five times, like that gap between Firefly and Rocket Lab. I mean, do you think that's a deserving gap on Rocket Lab's part, or do you think the market's missing something on Firefly? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of these valuations come from the story, and the story is very important.
Yeah.
It's maybe intangibles. It's a belief in Peter Beck, who is the CEO, is a phenomenal CEO of Rocket Lab, and there's a belief in him that they will be able to get Neutron going. They'll make it reusable, and then their playbook is going to work. So, yeah, I don't like Firefly is a great business too, and it's particularly. I think a lot of value in this industry will end up accruing to companies that have rockets, and Firefly has a rocket, and is building a big rocket with Eclipse. But Rocket Lab has also put its tentacles out into space systems and their satellite manufacturing, which is a nice big short-term revenue.
By the way, I have a little pop quiz for you. So of all the space companies that are out there, pure play space companies, do you know what is up the most this year, year to date? If you were to guess,
I'm gonna say Satellogic.
Wow, spot on.
Is it?
Nice job. Yeah. You want to guess how much it's up?
I have no idea, but that started at a very small market cap at the beginning of the year, and there's been a lot of excitement around Earth observation for a number of different reasons. So what do I win?
Yeah,
do I win Knicks tickets or what?
We'll see. Knicks tickets. Knicks tickets now, like home game. The first home game is like $4,000.
$4,000. What if we go to James Dolan and say, hey, we are going to run this show at the Garden.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he would love that.
Call it Garden in Space, and then we can watch the game as well.
Hey, we got basketball players now who care about space and defense.
Kyle Kuzma.
Exactly.
We got to bring him on the show.
Yeah, if he's watching this, Kyle, we'd love to get you on the show and sharing your very strong views on. He's been very active on X.
Yes. Yeah.
But no. So I mean, I guess my kind of wrapping thought on all this is just like, the market's up a lot. It's very exciting. I mean, a lot of these companies have waited a long time to have this much level of interest from investors. So it's amazing to see. And the companies, I mean, Rocket Lab, the Fireflies, the Planets of the world, they're looking at their valuations today. They're going out raising more capital, and they're going to continue to innovate and evolve. So that's exciting. But there is a little bit of an investor beware kind of mentality that I think we're starting to see or develop, which is like, these companies are great. The valuations are getting stretched. So there's no question that the valuations are getting stretched. A good chunk of that is the SpaceX IPO. So, we're going to find out in the next couple of weeks, like sort of what the outcome of that is going to be on the rest of the market. And I think there's a lot of debate that we can have, and we will have in a couple of weeks when we do our kind of SpaceX focused show. But yeah, I mean, I think in general, we've seen these types of, like, I'm not going to use the B word, bubble, before, like, in crypto and in technology in 21 with the Fed, kind of the Fed interest rate driven market. And right now, I just feel like there's some signs of that, and I think it's just important to maybe take a step back and think about, like, what is driving these stock prices up 10-20% on a daily basis when there's basically, like, in most cases, no news. So
yeah, that is fair. A lot of these companies are in the R&D phase, moving into what could be a big dream or could be more of a horizontal movement, but. We have another great show in 2 weeks.
Yes. So
we briefly discussed. We spent 15 minutes on SpaceX, but we are going to really dive into it, and it's an exciting moment for the space industry and capital markets and any rocket nerd out there.
Yes. So tune into our next show. It is June 9th, I want to say. Yeah. So it's Tuesday. It's on a Tuesday. We're going to bring in a number of different investors all across early stage VC, all the way up to kind of more institutional, kind of pre-IPO and kind of post kind of public capital. So we're going to have a lot of different views on the SpaceX IPO and what's to come in the broader space industry. So with that, we thank you guys for tuning in to our show, and we're excited to have you back watching us in a very short period of time. And until then, go Knicks.
Go Dak. That's good. Yep, go Knicks. Game.